We begin this last session, session 7, which we will do our complete review of all the units, and we will end with the chapter unit 14, the Franciscan role in the church. We begin the slideshow. The continued Franciscan task in the church is the unit that was in the original Build with Living Stones and similar the Franciscan role in the church. To begin with, we will review our final session and the continuing Franciscan task in higher education was also added as part of that mission of continuing the Franciscan charism and tradition. And as I speak, there is even a new initiative from the AFCU, Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities, for a continued effort in solidarity that our mission will live on within our universities and our other institutes that we service through our communities. For our review, we looked at Francis and Clare and the Franciscan family was our first unit. We continued looking at the Franciscan outlook of life based upon our understanding of the primacy of Christ and the Trinity. The Franciscan mission, traveling a gospel way of life in the church. Developing the Franciscan person, ongoing conversion to be Christ-like and live a gospel way of life. The Franciscan evangelists, relating as women and men of faith, continuing our Franciscan task in the church. So you will see all these units have built up to where are we in the 21st century as Franciscans. The history and reform of the Franciscan tradition. We looked at Francis Clare and the Franciscan family, history of Assisi, and the time of Francis was in turmoil, and Francis and Clare's conversion of becoming part of the family. Clare on that Palm Sunday evening, and Francis, various conversions, embracing the leper, the God speaking before Francis for the San Damiano cross, Francis, rebuild my house, and then the companions, those that initially followed Francis, those 12 companions, and then our continued mission in the church. We know in terms of the Franciscan family, our early tradition of who were our early mentors, you might say, is Francis and Clare and Saint Anthony, whose feast day, by coincidence, we celebrate tomorrow on the 13th of June, was the first teacher, you might say, to educate and build that Franciscan theology and spirituality that we know today through other scholars. Developing the Franciscan persons, it's an ongoing conversion to be Christ-like and live a gospel way of life. And as I speak, it continues to challenge us. Most recently, shootings in Buffalo, shootings in Texas, the war in Ukraine, and to be formed into Christ. And how do we live that out daily? We know for Francis and Clare, as I mentioned, those early conversions. And again, throughout this whole presentation, We used artwork, song, poetry, writings from various sources, but it was those early images in that it's a tradition, an oral tradition, that in the time of Francis, very few people were literate in terms of being able to read and write. So it was through pictures and portraits that that tradition has been continued. And that is one of the reasons why I'm using that in my presentations. Francis and Clare, the Christ-centered of life. This is the images of Mary Esther Stewart, the hands of Francis over Assisi, Bonagente, the good people of Christ, Clare's privilege of poverty on her deathbed, writing that she wants her sisters to live as she did in that privilege of poverty, that they will go with what God provides. And then the continued unity of the guidance that Francis and Clare, these hands in this picture of prayer before the San Damiano cross. Our program continued looking at peace, justice, and integrity of creation issues in the Franciscan movement. We looked at the units of Franciscan presence and dialogue, living with diversity in a pluralistic society, Franciscan perspective, peacemaking and enculturation in a culture of violence, the economy and global reality from a Franciscan perspective. And in that, we compared many images of the beautiful Canticle of Creatures, the poem that Francis wrote that to this day, children in Italy learn in school in their own dialect, and compared that to the economic way of the cross and the many challenges of the world today that interfere with the reality of living in peace and tranquility, and a Franciscan view of the environment, brother sun, sister moon. As I mentioned, we did that comparison. In the images of Franciscan perspective of peacemaking, we used the image of presence, dialogue, and witness in the story of the Wolf of Gubbio. And in this picture, it's a porcelain image from this artisan. Again, notice the image of Francis being at the same level as Brother Wolf. And in unison, they share that respect for each other. The Franciscan perspective, peacemaking and enculturation. Many institutes, Franciscan institutes and other institutes have, at the beginning of Peace Poll was a very common, may peace be on earth, to the many cultures that are part of your institute or the people that you relate to daily or work with or live with. And this is one image at Briarcliff University. And they have the image of Francis and the wolf below in terms of that peacemaking. The diversity in a pluralistic society, accepting all as one. This is one of the statues at Mount Laverna. And again, that we are to be Christ-like is to be like children, and that simplicity of living and acceptance of all. And this is an image of Francis with a child and that respect that they had for each other. Franciscan perspective, economy, and global reality. We know that Francis, in that image, in this image of Francis disrobing and giving up his worldly goods, as we know, his father was a very well-to-do merchant from the middle class, and Francis had all that he could ever desire of earthly goods, and he gave up those earthly goods to follow a more prayerful life of God. And here's the image of Franciscan view of the environment. The San Damian cross has many images, and this is one of Francis and Clare, and that respect for the earth and the environment. And in this San Damiano cross is those images of Mother Earth and respect for the environment. As the Canticle of Creatures is a piece of artwork that we used in previous slides, presenting Francis being one with nature and God's creation, and being Franciscan evangelists, this image of the wheat. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And this is taken from John. Again, our Franciscan tradition is based in scripture. And that was Francis's rule, you might say, that he tried to instill for us to live. As Franciscan women and men of faith, may the seed God has planted within your heart grow and bring forth the fruits of love and forgiveness, courage and strength, faith and hope, mercy and justice. We continue with the slide of the task on the church today as Franciscans. We are called to enter into the mystery of our lives and quietly listen to God's dream for humankind, a dream inviting us to let go of past events and of things long ago. For God is doing something new, a newness that is springing forth now. Do we not perceive it? Do we not perceive that the life of Jesus inaugurated new human beginnings? Blessed are you, poor of heart of love belongs to you. Blessed are you who mourn. The joy of the love will inspire you. Blessed are you who hunger and thirst for justice. The power of love will fill you. Who will assume a greater prophetic role in the church and society, seeking to bring about needed changes in values and structures? Jesus did it in his time. Francis did it in his time. Will I in my time? Claire's message in this slide continues to be a very prophetic image that we today continue to reflect on. Gaze upon Christ, consider Christ, contemplate Christ, as we desire to imitate Christ, taken from the second letter to Agnes of Prague. May we take time today to simply gaze upon Christ, to consider the infinite and generous love of Jesus for us, and to contemplate this love so we might desire to imitate Jesus and know what it means to love without limits. Gaze, consider, contemplate, taken from Joanne Brzezinski, OSF. Claire and Francis, again, that image of their hands, Mary Esther Stewart's art in this slide. Gaze, contemplate, and consider was a continued guidance that even we today follow and to imitate. We take our cell with us, a reminder from writings of Murray Bodo taken from the Legend of Perugia. Wherever we are or wherever we are going, we have our cell with us. For a brother body is the cell, and the soul is the hermit who dwells in it, meditating there and praying to God. Therefore, if the soul does not preserve quiet and solitude in its own cell. Of what profit is a cell made by hands? The labyrinth is a meditative reflection that is used most often today in many settings, many retreat areas, college campuses, place of blessings, place of reflection, continue the various labyrinths that for people to quietly meditate within. And it was an early Middle Age tradition for people when they could no longer go on actual pilgrimages during the Crusades because it wasn't safe. So they would walk the paths of a maze in a spirit of prayer and penance. For example, in the Cathedral of Chartres in France, this is the image in the window. With the help of such a maze, they experience with their whole being what it means to keep walking towards the goal, to the center, in spite of all detours. An overview of our Franciscan intellectual tradition. Franciscan outlook of life is based upon our understanding of the primacy of Christ and the Trinity, the relationship of Francis and Bonaventure. Bonaventure's relationship theory of the Trinity is one that we talked about, represented in the water fountain, the overflowing goodness of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and it's that spirit that continues to overflow. And Bonaventure's writings on the reduction of the arts through theology in the theories of three, and the artisan is giving back to the gifts that God provided for them. And it's, again, it was a series of threes and ones, which is common in Bonaventure's writings. And Scotus, the beauty of the Franciscan tradition, and that whole aspect of Hechetas, that each person is unique in their own way and that we should accept each person individually. In our Franciscan intellectual tradition, during the Middle Ages, Franciscan played a lead role in establishing the great universities of Europe. And this slide reminds us of Oxford, Cambridge, and Paris. In the 19th century, they came to Western New York to continue the tradition at St. Bonaventure University. Now we enter the 21st century. The world of education has changed dramatically, but the one element remaining constant, the values of a Franciscan education. And that has taken on various perspectives and images. So again, here's the writings of Franciscan scholars. A known scholar in Duns Scotus is Mary Beth Ingham. In her writings of Scotus for Dunces, an introduction to the subtle doctor, is truly a must-read book for all. And Mary Beth Ingham has been officially welcomed and has received a habit, a Franciscan habit, as part of her contributions to the Franciscan family. Bonaventure's Christ in Francis, the images within the stained glass windows at St. Bonaventure University Chapel, tells the story of Bonaventure and the story of Francis, and those early images of how Bonaventure entered into that Franciscan spirit and tradition of finding Christ in Francis. So Francis received the stigmata, Bonaventure writes about the stigmata and what made Francis tick. In this slide, it's a review of the Bonaventure's Christology, Christ-centered of human history, from Zachary Hayes, taken out of Joseph Reichel and Andre Serino's book. All contradictions and opposites within our life coincide in the very center, Christ, the Alpha and the Omega. So you can see in this slide, again, the compare and contrast of image, vision, blindness, light, darkness, joy, pain, sweetness, bitterness. And as I mentioned before, the depth of humiliation to liberate creation is seen in this Christocentrism of Francis receiving the stigmata. This is a mural that is in St. Bonaventure University's chapel from the seraphic angel with those imprints of the wounds of Christ given to Francis. In this slide, we are reminded of Bonaventure's mission, the person of Francis. Bonaventure was a theologian and university professor by trade, and yet he loved with all his might. He fell in love, was deeply touched by, and fascinated with the person of Francis of Assisi. He reached out to embrace the cross that was placed before him. He delved deeper into his ongoing passionate search for how to live the Franciscan life. The person of Francis on the journey, and this slide continues that story. Now, at the end of our journey, we have come full circle back to the reality we noted as key to understanding Bonaventure's journey, that soul's journey into God, the story of Francis's being one with Christ, namely deep restlessness and the desire for peace. And the way to peace is not so much like a stroll through a garden, but more like a difficult trek. It is a journey that demands a great deal of endurance and patience, but reveals itself as filled with surprise and tension. How many crosses are there in human lives? In this slide is the wheel of goodness itself, the brothers and sisters, the servants who love and respect each other. As we know, the early Franciscans were the lay penitents, as Francis wrote a letter to the faithful. And here are servants who love and respect others. In this image, Bonaventure brings together all the elements of a wheel of goodness itself. Each section supports the whole. If you diminish or take one away, you impair the whole. The numbered poles from the upper half are opposites to the numbers below half. So if you were to look at properties and community, constantability and plurality, production, co-equality, co-eternal, mission, order, conformity, distant personality. So again, this is the wheel of love and respect for others. Our overview of our mission, the continued Franciscan task in the church, relating as Franciscan women and men, and St. Bonaventure University and other universities of higher education in our Franciscan tradition continue the Franciscan mission in higher education. Earth being an earth community, Franciscan missionary spirit is one that we all share. A spirit in this slide, a spirit present within us and among us, calling us to be faithful, faithful in honoring the commitment made to embrace all creation, an embrace of reverence for the sacred within each of us, others, and all of creation, an embrace of celebration of the diversity, sacredness, and connectedness in the cosmic community of the universe, an embrace of the vulnerability needed to change attitudes and structures of injustice, an embrace of the receptivity needed to respond to the challenge of the poor, an embrace of the justice needed in the presence of diversity, an embrace of the absorption needed for us to create a new life out of oppression, an embrace of the vision needed for us to be a healing, sacred, and intimate presence to all in the earth community. And in this slide, it's the future task in the church. And here, Bonaventure goes before the Pope asking, build with living stones, that image that the Pope had a dream of this little poor man holding up the structure of the church. And that's where the title Build with Living Stones comes from, that image. And in this slide, it is the Pope giving Francis the grace for the Franciscan order to be recognized by the church. And a prayer that is attributed to Francis, again, we look at opposites. We believe this prayer was written in the 1930s. And it's really a perspective of the admonitions of Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. As I mentioned, the Beatitudes of St. Francis, you might say, can be found in the admonitions. This is a book on the admonitions of St. Francis, sources and meanings, by Bob Karras, one of our present Franciscan scholars. And again, we look at these admonitions concerning of evil of one's own will, concern of perfect obedience, which is the ability to listen, appropriate respect for your superiors, being more Christ-like and not boastful, imitating Christ, doing good works, avoiding sin and envy, of love, the respect of the body, corruption of evil to one another, discerning the Spirit of God, about patience, poverty of spirit, being peaceful, purity of heart. In the next slide, admonition 17 through 28 is the humble servant, compassion towards one's neighbor, humble servant of being a God, Christ-like, the good and the vain religious, frivolous and talkative, about correction, on humility, true love, on servants of God, and honoring all clerics, virtues or vice, goodness, good which is hidden, lest it be lost. And one Franciscan university, Briarcliff University, celebrated its 75th anniversary, and it's a legacy of commitment. And their mission, Briarcliff University, is a community committed to higher education within a liberal arts and Catholic perspective. In the Franciscan tradition of service, caring, and openness to all, Briarcliff emphasizes quality education for its students, combining a broad intellectual background with career development. The university challenges its members to grow in self-awareness and to their relationships to others and to God. This is very similar to other universities. Their values as a Catholic Franciscan university, identity enhancing by the presence and sponsorship of the Dubuque Franciscans and the support of the Diocese of Sioux City, and our challenging academic environment that includes liberal arts education, academic integrity, and academic freedom, on focus of the student that promotes academic success and extra co-curricular experiences, our culture of service to our constituents, to the Siouxland community and beyond, our appreciation of diversity and our respect for each person, our commitment to shared governance and collaborative decision-making, our innovative response to change, the envisions of promising and confident future. So we compare this to our Franciscan charism and the mission, and look at the Franciscan intellectual mission as a value, knowledge, integrity, and community. Our Franciscan charism of contemplation, love, respect for the dignity for all, joy, peace, and compassionate service. So again, this is just one example of one Franciscan institute, but how it is universal across all of our agencies and programs and services and institutes. Briarcliff, a history of forward thinking. Give Me Wisdom. Again, founded by the Dubuque Franciscans. There were 23, there's 24 Franciscan universities. 4 of them were founded by First Order friars, and all the rest were founded by women religious communities of the Third Order. Also, TOR Brothers, the Brothers of Brooklyn, are part of that Third Order. So, founded by Franciscan women and men, these communities, the purpose to educate members of their own community, to promote education for women, provide seminary education for men, invited by dioceses to develop Catholic higher education programs, and many institutions have European roots. So these are some of the commonalities that we have. And is the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities, and there's a yearly pilgrimages for students during the winter break from all the universities to go on a common pilgrimage to Assisi. And then in May, after graduation, there is also an opportunity for the faculty, staff, administrators, and trustees to go also on a common retreat, a pilgrimage to Assisi with other colleagues from other Franciscan universities. And this is the Franciscan pilgrimage program that is based out of Wisconsin, has a number of pilgrimages with different themes, different groups. So for example, in June, our student veterans will go on the Veterans Pilgrimage, which retraces the different story of Francis. Francis as the knight in shining armor Francis, the knight in shining armor that was taken as a prisoner of war, and that moment of conversion. And they go to different sites that were battlefields. So again, it's a time of healing and reconciliation within as well as without. So here's the Association of Franciscan Colleges and Universities. The mission of the Association of Franciscan College and University institutions characterized by Franciscan values is to support the members' mission of Catholic higher education by providing a forum for dialogue, fostering and facilitating collaboration among the members. These are the locations of the Franciscan universities. As you will see, for the most part, it is East Coast, Midwest, the Mississippi River I'm thinking of, because many of the universities are around women religious communities. So going from Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, Illinois, Iowa, and what's not on here is we do have a Baton Rouge Franciscan University in Louisiana. So here in California is the Franciscan School of Theology, Berkeley, presently located at University of San Diego University. And Indiana, we have Fort Wayne, and we have Marian College that was founded by the Oldenburg Franciscans. In Iowa, we have the Dubuque Franciscans that founded Briarcliff University, and the Clinton Franciscans. In Michigan, we have Madonna University. In Illinois, we have Joliet, University of St. Francis, and Quincy, which is by the OFMs. Washington, D.C. is the Franciscan Federation, which is now moved to New York, Brooklyn. In Ohio, the Sylvania Franciscan has Lord's College, Franciscan University in Steubenville, is by OFMs. In Wisconsin, Viterbo University, we have Cardinal Stritch University in Milwaukee, and Manitowoc Silver Lake College has just closed. But as I mentioned, in Pennsylvania, we had Newman College by the Aston Franciscans, Loretto St. Francis University by Third Order Brothers, and Alvernia was the Bernardine Franciscans in Reading, Pennsylvania. In New York, we have Siena College near Albany, and we have St. Bonaventure University, both run by Holy Name Province of Friars. And down in New York City, there's Franciscans International at the UN, and we have St. Francis College, which is run by the Brothers of Brooklyn, Third Order, TOR. And so the future of our Franciscan universities involve collaboration, and they're presently working on a new collaboration to be more affiliated with Rome. But again, as each university celebrates its history, and it's that continued collaboration with Franciscan AFCU. And we are reminded, Francis and Claire, you are what you are in the eyes of God, nothing more, nothing less. and that continued the image of the Tao in this icon of the eyes, and how we are all with one, and Francis and Claire being Christ-like, and that eye image is so important. The journey is just beginning for us. In this slide, this beautiful sunset, and we look at the Franciscan pilgrimage walk to the heartbeat of here Briarcliff University, but how each institute, again, this is just one image at Briarcliff of their pilgrim walk, of what images do you have in your area or your institute or your university that you could also develop a pilgrim walk, just as the labyrinth took the place of actually doing a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And this is an opportunity to take advantage of what are those images of our Franciscan tradition that is right in front of us every day. In the prayer for guidance before the San Damiano cross, most high, glorious God, bring light to the darkness of our hearts. Give us right faith, certain hope, perfect charity. God, grant us wisdom, insight, so we might always discern your holy and true will. And the blessing for Claire, the true blessing of Claire, again, talking about acceptance and of diversity, it's also in Braille on this slide. The blessing of Claire is very simple. May God be with you and you always with God. I have done in this slide, I have done what is mine to do. May Christ teach you what is yours to do. As we continue that journey as people of faith and our responsibility to the church and our role in the church. Pax et bonum, peace and all good to all. Bona gente, the good people of Assisi, but bona gente, the good people that we work with today. What is our challenge for the future? To be rooted in the spirit of life through the writings of Francis and Claire, to be open to risk and JPIC challenges, to walk with courage in a B attitude of presence, dialogue, and witness. As we end with this group discussion at the end of this series, can we embrace the vision? Who will assume a greater prophetic role in the church and society, seeking to bring about needed changes in values and structures? Jesus did it in his time. Francis did it in his time. Will I in my time? How do we handle actions on the part of the hierarchy that go against the spirit of the gospel? How can we be in solidarity with the church of the poor in a lifestyle, ministry, and attitude from our standpoint of our class and origin? The future, what is the future of St. Bonaventure University, our other universities? The continued task of Franciscans in the church. What is the continuing Franciscan task in higher education? What is the continued task in the church? To be one with all. On the road again, happy trails to all. In this slide, again, one of the, when I was at Briarcliff University, I had the opportunity to go on a mission trip to Honduras. This is something that is collaborative in Sioux City area with one of the high schools, Catholic high schools, and it continued that those students came to Briarcliff and asked, could they continue this tradition? And it has developed into a extended community opportunity. Parents go that are plumbers, electricians, people in the medical field go to provide medical services. They started various outreach medical centers out in areas that are do not have the resources. And so Pax et Bonum, peace and all good. On the road again, happy trails to you until we meet again. Pax et Bonum. This brings us to the end of our slides and our presentation. And we will hopefully, if you have any questions at the end of this, we'll continue to dialogue. And I would be most willing to do any type of presentation that might be needed at any time. And it was my pleasure to provide this. By the way, the image that is behind me is St. Bonaventure University wolf, which were taken from the Wolf of Gubbio. And this is a quote that a couple of our teams use in terms of their preparation. The strength of the pack is the wolf. The strength of the wolf is the pack. And that our student section is called the Wolf Pack. And so again, it's that solidarity of being one with the other and acceptance of all. Pax et Bonum.